welcome to the regular ARB meeting of Thursday, November 21st. If the Secretary would please call the roll.
Chair Lippert.
Present.
Vice Chair Pop.
Present.
Board Member Liu.
Present.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Present.
Board Member Guyere.
Here.
Okay. We have 5 members present. With that, this is the time when members of the public may speak to any item that is not on today's agenda. Do we have any speakers? Okay, with that, we will go on to approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes for November 7th, 2013. Any corrections or revisions?
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm abstaining as I was absent.
Okay. We have 4 with 1 member abstaining, Board Member Pop, because he was not present. With that, are there any agenda changes, additions, and deletions?
There are no changes other than the 2 items noted, 4190 El Camino Real and 500 University.
Okay. For members of the public that might be here for those 2 items, that's 4190 El Camino Real. That's not being heard today. That will be heard at our regular meeting of December 5th. And 500 University Avenue, that will be heard at our regular meeting of December 5th also. So with that, we will go on to the first item, which is 777 Welsh Road, request by Stoker Northway on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Leyland Stanford Junior University for a preliminary architectural review of a proposal to demolish a 3,046 square foot building of a larger 14,142 square foot 3-building complex and construction of a new 3-story 11,724 square foot building for a new overall total of 22,820 square feet, and the zone district is MOR, that's medical office and medical research. And if staff would like to introduce the project, please.
Thank you, Chair and board members. The project before you is, the primary request for this project is to obtain board feedback on the first phase of this project. The first phase of the project would be to replace one of the 3 one-story buildings with a new 3-story 11,724 square foot building consisting of cement plaster and steel structural glazing system. And it would require minor reconfiguration of the parking lot, but the parking facility would remain as currently proposed. The second phase, which would be to replace the remaining 2 buildings with a 1 new 3-story, 23,400 square foot building with ground floor parking and connectivity on the upper floors with a bridge between the 2 buildings. Those conceptual plans were provided for that, and the applicant is requesting feedback again primarily on that first phase, but is requesting board feedback on the conceptual second phase. Also included in your packet would be comments from Stanford University regarding their comments on the design, and they've expressed some concerns, and staff share some of that given the recent development along Welsh Road with the street improvements as well as the 2 new medical office buildings that the board has reviewed and approved recently. And with that, staff will return the presentation over to the applicant, and they do have a presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll have the applicant presentation. Mr. Northway, you're going to present for the applicant. So you will have 10 minutes. And what we'll do is have board members' questions and comments.
Sounds good. I'm John Northway of Stecker Northway, and our design team is here. Cynthia Munoz is the project architect and chief designer, and Jackie Keller is our landscape architect. I wanted to run through just a few of the criteria that we used in order to put this design together, and also for a couple of you, probably Lee and Claire, I know you know this is the 3rd building we have designed for this site. The first 2 didn't get built because of financial restraints. We were actually about 40% done with the last building that was approved on this site as far as construction documents and when the economy crashed in 2008. This site has some really unique circumstances that the other sites out on Welch Road don't have. There's a continuing practice of medical dental doctors, and they need to stay on the site because there's no other private offices on Welch Road that they can move to during construction. So thus, we're looking at this phased construction where this building will house the people that are currently practicing on the back part of the site, so then the second phase can be built. The second phase will be built, but they're very dedicated to doing it, and part of the way this building is designed is acknowledging that that second phase will be built. This site doesn't have some of the advantages that some of the Stanford sites does, in that we can't combine with other sites to simplify the site planning and the parking. And Cynthia will go into that. The clients and ourselves wanted to have this building have a unique feeling because it is a medical dental office building. It's not a hospital building, and it's not a university medical office building. The dentists particularly need lots of glass, especially north-facing glass, because it's very important for how they practice, how they see your mouth, and they really love to have natural light. That's the reason for the amount of glass. I'm going to turn it over now to Cynthia, and then Jackie will follow with any landscape comments, and then we're happy to have a good discussion about Stanford's concerns, and I know our friends from Stanford are here.
Good morning. I'm Cynthia Munoz from Stecker and Northway Architects. Hopefully I do this right. I'm sure you're familiar with this building, but just in case not, I wanted to include a few site photos showing the existing structure. The one in the upper right shows the front building that is proposed to be demolished, and the lower photo is the same front building just viewed from the other end. So this is the existing site, and it shows it dashed in the front building that's to be removed and the existing parking along the front facing Welch Road that is to be reconfigured to accommodate the new site plan. So as John mentioned, we were given a couple of very specific, not a couple, a number of very specific criteria from the client. The main one being that the tenants in the back remain fully operational. The client wanted as much space between the existing buildings to remain and the new building as possible so that they can maintain the courtyard that the existing suites look out into. They also did not want to do anything that would impact or result in having to do anything to the existing buildings, such as sprinkler them or construct 1 hour construction in order for the existing building to maintain the glazing that they have for their dental suites. And so we had to position the new building pretty specifically based on what the code would allow to achieve that. The area in green that's highlighted on this site plan just more clearly outlines that that's the area of phase 1 that we're asking for feedback on. This shows both phase 1 and the conceptual phase 2 reconfiguration. The way that the volumes of the building were arranged, we wanted to make each function very clear. So in the upper part of the new floor plan would be the toilet core, followed by the circulation core where the stairs and elevators are, and then the main volume being the office suites, and then a secondary stair for second means of egress. And the office suites are arranged such that they can maximize the north light that the dental tenants will be moving back into very much value. And this is the concept of how the phase 2 would connect into the lobby of phase 1 via a bridge. The lobby, while it seems to be possibly oversized for just phase 1, was thought with consideration of the future phase 2 connecting into it. You have these renderings in your packet, but I just like to use these for reference. So we also wanted to three-dimensionally express the different functions through expressing the volumes in different ways and stepping down the massing and stepping it back where appropriate. So on the far right would be the toilet core, the glassy central volume being the lobby, which they very much wanted to be visible from the driveway entrance and wanted to be as transparent as possible. So we maximized the glass there. And then on the left is the bank of office suites. And we wanted to pull in some Ipe wood slats to give the building some texture and warmth. And we thought it would really complement the neutral colors of the cement plaster that we chose. And we really wanted to pick a palette that we thought wasn't mimicking the buildings around, but would complement in a way using natural and neutral tones, picking up the colors, natural buff colors of surrounding buildings and the landscaping. So that was the thought process behind the palette. Here's just a slightly different view of the front of the building and the view of the back of phase 1. And just the other end. And the east and west sides, they really wanted to utilize those because to use the more, the spaces that didn't need as much natural light. So that's how we decided to anchor and arrange all the volumes. And this shows one view of the conceptual phase 2 once it's constructed into phase 1. Phase 2 is very preliminary in its massing, but we wanted to at least think about how the siting and connection into phase 1 would work. So hopefully these give you a good idea. And here is the east side. And then I'm going to turn this over to Jackie Keller to talk about the landscape concept.
Okay. I thought what I'd do is talk about the trees, since that's the main thrust here. All the trees that are going to be planted are going to be 24-inch when they go in. The Fraxinus udii, which is an ash that is planted on Welsh Road, when it's planted at 24-inch box, it'll be 10 to 12 feet high with a 3 to 5 foot spread, and it will reach 25 to 30 feet high in about 10 years with a 15-foot spread. It will eventually get 60 to 80 feet high. So it's not a small tree, and I think that it will really complement the edges of the architecture. The tree that is around the building is used as an accent tree. It's an eastern redbud. It will also be a 24-inch box tree. It's 9 to 10 feet high with a 4 to 5 foot spread. It's also a fast grower, and it will eventually reach 25 to 30 feet high. It was selected for pedestrian complement. It's got flowers and it's got some fall color. The last tree is the tree on the north side, and it's a difficult tree to pick because it's in a bioswale. And bioswales, as you know, have got all these fast-growing, fast-draining soils, and yet they could have some water. So we picked a Japanese maple tree. And the Japanese maple tree will be kind of on the edge. It's not the species that you see, the low species. It's the tall species, and it will be eventually 20 feet high. So, and it potential. Oh, I guess I'm done. The last thing
If you could wrap it up, please.
Okay, the last thing I want to talk about was the tree that is planted on the edges between the phase 1 and phase 2 is a black timberback bamboo, and it will be a clumper, and it will stay 25 feet high.
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is the time when members of the public may speak to this item. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Okay, I'll keep the public hearing open just in case members of the public come by later. We'll begin with Board Member Guyer. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to give each board member 5 minutes to make questions and comments, and then we'll go around for a second round if there are any follow-ups on that. So you'll have 5 minutes.
Questions? I don't really have any questions right at the moment. I do, I'm a bit concerned that on the backside of these phase one, where you end up with a fairly narrow 3-story high alleyway, if you want to call it, there are windows there on this building, and so once it gets built, either the tenant is looking at a blank wall, or maybe at the adjacent tenant in the other building. So I mean, I find that a little, I don't know, awkward or.
Yep. May I comment? Or,
I don't know.
Whatever. How do you want to do that, Lee?
No, it's questions and comments. So if he has questions for you,
okay, if
then
you
you
want
can
to
answer
phrase
them.
it as a question,
Yeah, sort of.
Dialogue.
Yeah, I don't need an answer right at the moment. I'm just sort of throwing this out. So I started reading the analysis of Stanford, and I agree with the architect that I don't think this building needs to look like another Stanford building with the same color palette and as they have for their various buildings. As long as this has a tendency, which it looks like it's going to begin to mimic the color scheme and the earth tones of the adjacent buildings, I don't have a problem with that. I've done way too many medical office buildings that I need, so I understand the desire of a lot of dentists to get as much natural light as you can, so I understand that concept of it. The parking is, I don't really have a question with it. The only thing I find rather interesting, and I can see why you did it this way, is because to basically park in front, you have to go all the way around the entire site before you want to park in the first parking stall right in the by the entry, and that seems like you're forcing people to do a whole lot of driving on the site if all you want to do is park in front somewhere and walk in the front door. So I think that should be looked at a little bit. The front building and the back building don't even compare as far as how much effort was put into those. This was literally a front building and, oh yeah, we need another 20,000 square feet, so throw something in the back. I mean, the building in the rear is very bland. I mean, nothing that I would write home about as an architect. So I think that needs to be brought up. I mean, I'm a firm believer that when this is all done, it's going to be a 4-sided project, and the only site or the side that's going to look even closely interesting will be the very front facade. The other 3 facades won't be. So I think those need to be improved greatly. I think that's fine for right now.
Board Member Liu.
So thank you for your presentation. You know, I must confess that I had a hard time looking at this project because I really liked your last design for it, and so this seems to be like a huge step backwards. But I sort of understand the the logic of phasing it in, and I've talked to people at Stanford, and I understand that the whole nature of Welch Road is changing. Even just medical practices within the medical center have been changing. So I understand sort of where you're coming from. I think with regard to the design, on site planning, it seems to me like Stanford has changed the whole idea of the front setback, and really they've been putting all of that in landscape reserve. And so I would ask you guys to consider if there's a way of removing the front parking and have some sort of other options, like maybe you have more lifts for staff, and then maybe all the visitors get some of the perimeter. Yeah, that'd be great if you thought about all of these things. And then also, if that's not possible, is to increase the landscape separation, like along the perimeter of Welch Road, because it seems like you're actually sort of reducing the landscape buffer there. And Stanford, just elsewhere on campus and in the research park, they generally do an amazing job of screening parking. If you look on like an aerial map, you see these huge parking lots, but if you actually drive down the street, you don't really see anything, like on Page Mill Road or whatnot. And so, so I would like to, minimize the aesthetics of the parking as much as possible. And then, I'm sorry. So, did you want to? If you had a response for the parking?
Yeah, I think probably that'll. We're very happy to get your feedback on Phase 2. Your comments are right on. We probably if we spent more than 2 days on it, that would have been a lot. It was really, and it was an original Stanford concern. It was our concern too, that if it was just a building sitting there and then with the one story behind it, it looked kind of weird. And so we wanted to, the client didn't want to spend a lot of money designing Phase 2 until he knew he had a Phase 1. But we're not happy with Phase 2 either. We completely agree with your comments and Stanford comment that we're going to have a whole lot more space between Phase 1 and Phase 2, and it also has to be a four-sided building. So we completely agree with you and Stanford on that, and actually your comments will be helpful because we will come back with Phase 2. It'll be a whole architectural review. We're not asking for any kind of review other than your comments, which will help us design it. Also, when you look at the site plan, several years ago, it had entry up on the top of the site plan and an entry exit down at the bottom of the site plan, which was driving the city crazy because it was too close to the entry into the Children's Hospital. So we actually came back, redesigned the parking, and took out the second driveway. But that does create what you talked about. You got to drive around to get to it. One of the things we appreciate that Stanford wants to have more of a landscape buffer along Welch Road, and I think as we look at Phase 2, and since the invention of these wonderful parking machines, which Claire knows about, I think we would look at using them so we might be able to ease some of the parking burden on the front. We'll have to work with the fire department because we still have to we'll have to drive in front of the building as far as the fire trucks are concerned.
That doesn't really bother me so much as actually that you're reducing.
But we thought we would, in Phase 2, we really would look at the utilization of some parking machines so we can get some relief on the front. In these two buildings that we have designed and have costed out, underground parking absolutely doesn't work from a budgetary standpoint. So we have to be creative on what we can do.
And I have one more question for you on site planning. So I vaguely recall a discussion about on your what do you call it, east property line. I guess the one that's adjacent to the Children's Hospital. So they have like a walkway that's part of a whole larger promenade that goes to the medical center. And I vaguely recall some discussion about that. And I was wondering what the current thinking is about that, if there's any shared use, is there any need to?
I think I'll let Jackie comment on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, it is a shared use. I think what we would intend to do is to complement that with some native plantings so that everybody be a good neighbor.
Okay, thinking like no fence and it's just that it's all open. Okay, great. On the building, oh, sure, that's fine.
My intent here in terms of the time is really to keep this more of a dialogue because we're in a preliminary phase here. And I kept the public hearing open. I noticed, I forgot, I guess there were some people from Stanford here. Does anybody from Stanford wish to also speak to this item? Just simply come up to the podium here and then fill out a speaker card and hand it to one of the staff members.
Do that now or talk now?
Talk now,
Okay.
Card afterwards.
Sure.
And introduce yourself, please.
Hi, good morning. Zach Posner. I'm a senior campus planner with the University Architects Office at Stanford. I was a project manager for the medical center on the Welch Road project and the Children's Hospital and the Adult Hospital. So I'm pretty familiar with this neighborhood. We've had really good dialogue with the architects over the last few months, but a lot of our comments have not been implemented or received, so we're hoping that this board is going to share our advice to some extent. I don't want to go into too much detail on the specific architectural comments. It's not our intent to make this building look just like a Stanford building at all. We recognize it's a totally different tenant, but our real concern is about the site planning approach. Over the last 10 years, I would say most of our plans have tried to minimize the impression of parking, minimize the amount of asphalt on site, and this project is really a victim of its own phasing strategy and implements pretty much the same existing problems that exist on Welch Road now. We've asked the tenant to look at alternative strategies that can improve on these things the same way we've done with our projects, with additional landscape at the front of the project and underground parking if possible, and a massing that's a little bit more friendly on the street edge. So those are kind of the broader site planning issues we've been concerned with. The details of the architecture, we have confidence that the architect can resolve.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to Board Member Pop.
Great. All right, thank you very much for coming forward with a preliminary on this. Really appreciate that. I think it's important for projects to do this, and especially when there's this kind of comment that's going on. You know, Zach, I appreciate your coming today and sharing with us your perspective on this, and having read through Stanford's comments. You know, I have to say, a lot of what they're saying reflects my own thoughts about this as I was reading through it. I too think that this project really is a victim of its phasing strategy, and it's really causing some very challenging issues overall that eventually the project is stuck with forever. And if there was any way to do this differently, I'd encourage you to try and do that, because you're really in a corner here in many ways, because of trying to hold on to certain buildings in order to build the first building, in order to tear those down later and do it. My own feeling about this, John, is that we really have to review this as one building. And I understand that you haven't had a lot of time or a lot of authorization to work on that second phase. But unless we really understand what that is and where it's going to go, it's really hard to give you an approval for this first piece. The 10-foot wide space between the two buildings currently is really untenable to me, and I think that if you can show us what your intent is for that second phase in a more clear and thoughtful way, it will really help us, it really help me to get farther along in this. I want to just echo the comments that others have made already about the landscape reserve. I have to say I don't entirely agree with Board Member Guyet's comments about it being okay to be entirely different, and I think that I'm more consistent with Stanford's approach here, in that it should be more the same. We're often challenged about context and compatibility, and I think that putting a building in this location that will look so dramatically different from the others that are surrounding it really changes the character of this. That, in conjunction with its placement on the site and the other things, really, I think, yields a fairly non-compatible approach. And so anything that you can do to increase that and be sensitive to the issues will really be helpful. items such as stepping the building back or trying to simplify the overall design of the building a bit will be really helpful. I think there was this comment about parking that Stanford had, and I'm wondering how much smaller Phase 1 would have to be to achieve more greenbelt in the front of the building. How much square footage would you have to take out of this in order to provide enough parking? Or if we look at parking stackers, that's a fine option too. I understand from your comments that depressing the parking fully is financially not feasible, but I'm wondering if there's a way to partially depress it, to go down a half a level and compromise. Appreciated the landscape architect's comments about the tree species, but I think that I'm still looking for something larger, bigger trees. Unless I misunderstood what you were saying, they still seem all sort of the same. And when I go out to the site, and from what I understand is being placed at other sites nearby, the species will get quite a bit taller than what you're proposing. And so again, that compatibility option, or compatibility discussion comes into play here. Yeah, I think just to sum up quickly for me, this is a tough one for me. I like the style of this building. I think it's handsome, and I like the colors that you've chosen, and I like the materials that you've chosen. I'm not comfortable with that palette in this location. The darker colors, the dark window systems, the amount of ePay that you've got in there is all coming together for me as something that is quite handsome, but it's not the right building for this location. So that's my comment for today. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Thanks for bringing this forward. On a preliminary, I'll disclose that I did participate in the design of the previous two projects that were approved on this site. So, understanding the project, I am very aware of how the layout is driven by both the parking and the phased nature of the construction. It would be great if we could get landscaping in front of the building, but I understand in Phase 1 it would be extremely difficult to make that happen. I'm wondering whether there could be any provision for taking away that front parking in Phase 2 and getting all the parking in the back in Phase 2. And feel free to comment on what I'm saying if you have anything. I'm also wondering whether there's anything you can do with a DEE that would allow you to slightly place the building differently. If it did give you an enhancement to the design, it might be something that findings could be made for. So I'd encourage you to look at whether there are any opportunities there. As far as the Phase 2 portion, I completely understand not designing it now, but I do think that having the site planning concept for it and just the basic blocky massing is very important in our formal review. Did you consider rotating that back building at all so that it's more aligned with the side property line?
We actually hadn't looked at that option yet. It's something we could certainly explore.
Yeah, the reason I ask that is if you did get a rotation there, you might open up some breathing room between the two buildings, because it does feel very narrow between them right now.
Right. Or perhaps breaking up the massing and staggering it in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can look at that.
That would be a good thing to look at. And the other thing to look at with that would be perhaps pushing the rear building further back on the side as well. Maybe it can overhang the parking or something. Use your creativity. One of the really important things in the existing building that makes it nice for the tenants is that every one of the spaces has a garden that they look out on. So I would encourage you to maximize landscaping and really be aware of the views out of the tenant spaces. As far as the building design itself, I really like that L-shaped form at the lobby. That's a really elegant shape. It seems that it really wants some kind of a balance or counterpoint on the other side, though. You've got a very strong right side, and the left side is fairly bland. The ipe, you have some ipe on the side of the building that's in a vertical orientation that harkens back to the existing screens, which is lovely. I really like that concept. I'd like to see perhaps less ipe on the building as a whole to really focus on the special places where you do put it, and maybe keep those down at pedestrian level, make them something that you feature. And I also believe that this building doesn't need to match other Stanford buildings. I like that you use a color palette that is compatible, but I'm not opposed to some wood. I think there may be too much wood right now. And there may be just a few too many things going on this building, given its size. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming forward with a prelim. Hopefully, 3 times a charm, and you'll be able to move forward at some point with this scheme.
So you can get it done before the economy crashes again.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for staff. With regard to the front yard setback, they could apply for a DEE on this. Is that something that is available to them?
Yes, it would allow some amount of deviation from the code.
Okay. And then with regard to phasing a project like this, if they moved forward with phase 1 and for some reason there was an economic downturn again, or difficulty in financing, and they weren't able to move forward with phase 2, we would be married to whatever the hybrid solution is, which is a 1-story building in the back and a multi-story building in the front, correct?
Yes, when we are going through the formal review process, we would have to look at both options. One that would include a phase 2, but also establish conditions in case phase 2 does not happen.
Yeah. I'm just going to state for the record that I think that that's very problematic. I think that that's the elephant in the room here, which is that there are no assurances that phase 2 would be moving forward. And so even though it is a phased approach, it really is an entire building that needs to be reviewed and approved and move forward as a complete process. So I would strongly consider an approach that, phase 1 is built and phase 2 happen shortly thereafter, in order to be able to have the final on this entire project. So even though they are separate buildings and they're distinct, they need to happen. They need to happen together in a process that's satisfactory to the city as well as Stanford University. With regard to the site planning, I think that there's opportunities here that are lost. I think the first one, obviously, is looking for a DEE to be able to encroach into the front yard setback in certain ways. I don't think the second phase of the building is terribly responsive to the irregular shape of the property. I think there's a missed opportunity, particularly on the east elevation, to actually have maybe a sawtooth approach to the side of the building where it actually staggers and there are views and light opportunities for more light to come in that way. So I think that that's something that needs to be looked at. I think you can have an irregular shaped building and yet it can feel as though it responds to the site. And in some ways it would feel as though it's a rectangular building in some ways, or it's responding to the topography and the shape of the property. I'm not in general support about the 2-driveway approach. I like the idea of entering and leaving in one location. But I could be persuaded otherwise if more landscaping took up the front of the building, so you actually had to go around the building, you know, and into the street to go back around again. So otherwise, I would say just forget it and only have one driveway. So, and then the last part is that I think that there's opportunities missed here for more connectivity. Generally, sites like this wind up putting fences all the way around the property because there's a problem with people parking here and then walking to the next building, and you really want to have the parking dedicated to the tenants there. But frankly, people who are working in this building are going to make use of the other amenities in the neighborhood. And so, for instance, the cafes and cafeterias over at the Stanford Medical Center, they're going to want to walk over there, and so without gates or locks or barriers, we really want to make a smooth transition for people working here to be able to go there, and people who need to go to the medical center and then maybe come to this building to be able to get there without driving. So we will go for a second round of questions and comments. I just want to make sure, are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to this item? Okay, if not, we'll return. Board Member Guyer, do you have any follow-ups on that?
Yeah.
You'll have 5 more minutes.
Actually, I don't think I need 5 minutes, but I agree. It's interesting when we use the term Phase 1 and Phase 2, I always envisioned that to be a construction concept, not a building concept, in the sense that, and that's why I made the comment on the building in the back. I think, and I agree with my fellow board members here, that for me to, judge this positively, I'm going to need to see the whole product. And then also, I agree, as far as from a practicality standpoint, I have no problem building the first one, giving temporary occupancy so the doctors or whatever from the back can move into the first one. But then the second part has to be built, as you said, very closely after that, or starting almost immediately, and then it's a finished product, because, as you said, it's going to be a strange concept to have this sort of 1 3-story building in the front, and or I should say a 3-story building in the front and then a 1-story building in the back. That's going to look worse than just leaving it the way it looks right now. I agree also that the site really hasn't been taken advantage of, and again, part of that is your restriction based on trying to keep the existing tenants in the back portion, because I agree. I think you can move the entire building back somewhat, still get some parking in the front, but create a much larger buffer of land or landscaping that everybody seems to want. But again, the reason you didn't do that is because of the constriction you had with the keeping that second building. So I think that may need to be looked at again. I think that's fine for now.
Board Member Liu?
I don't have any other issues that haven't already been addressed by the board. Thank you.
Board Member Pop?
Yeah, I'd love to ask if there's any history or discussion about taking the second building from the front down as part of Phase 1 as well. And, if there's an opportunity to, it seems like, there's a couple of different sizes of buildings here, and that's the tiny one. No, John, please, I'm sorry, don't mean to make you pop up.
They're using and occupying that building. One of the struggles we've had, and I really like the ideas you're coming up with, they're very helpful. The DEE might help us quite a bit. There's this thing called the building code, and you have to have the separation between the building that they're occupying. So what we're showing is a separation that works without having to go and sprinkle a building that then they're going to tear down. So that's what's sort of crushing us, is the separation we need from the building they're using and the front setback. So your ideas are very good. Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. So I'm totally confident that as you go back and rework and spend the appropriate amount of time designing phase 2, that the space between them will become comfortable and nice and, nice place to be. I'm just wondering if there's, I don't know. I like the building, right? The thing is that I like the character and the style of the building. I'm struggling with the scale of it and the massing and, just sort of how it's organized. Appreciate the other board members' comments about the materials and, particularly Claire's comments about placement and quantity and some of those things. But I guess I'm just wondering, is there a way to take that second building now as well and incorporate that into phase 1, make phase 1 bigger and put a modular on the site, or, work with the city to try and get some extra space someplace in the interim, some temporary solution that would allow that to be more appropriate for the long term. Because the thing that is most challenging about this project for me is that the phasing is driving everything in terms of the massing and the site organization and all these other pieces. And if you could just get a little more space for phase 1, it would make a huge difference, I think, in terms of the flexibility it gives you as an architect to come up with something great. And so I'd love to ask you to investigate that a little further with your client and see if there isn't some other way to go about this, because I think a lot of what is challenging today for me about this is just that it's pressed up so hard and there's so many other things going on. Thanks.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
No follow-ups.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the front of the building. First of all, I think that what you've come up with in concept is a really handsome approach. It's a very clean, articulate, almost manicured building. I like the way you've approached it. I have some questions as to whether it works with the other buildings around it. But I'm not that terribly, how should we say, dissuaded, because, frankly, that whole area is a forest. And it's really hard to see the connectivity between a lot of the buildings there, because you can't see the buildings for the trees, as they say. So I'm not concerned about the look and how it works with the other buildings, but I think that that's something that you just have to be mindful of and take a look at. The other thing is that I think that with the curve of Welsh Road there, I think there's a missed opportunity there for coming around or driving around and seeing the front of that building on the street facade. I think it has a lot of opportunity there. What's lacking from the facade of the building is wayfinding. I'm not quite sure that the front of the building speaks and says front of building, entrance to building. And that's what I'm looking for on this. Something that identifies that this is the front door. And just having that happen off the parking lot I don't think is quite as successful. I think that corner is where the Marguerite Shuttle and other buses, the Dumbarton Express stops. And so where the front door is going to be particularly important for people who are taking public transit or walking there. So that's something else I would look at. I guess the last part of it is, again, the responsiveness to the site and the phasing of the project. Again, I think that building this in 2 phases is the correct approach, but it needs to be a complete project or a complete building by the time there's occupancy on it. So I think what the key is the financing of the buildings, is to have that taken care of, put to bed, so that when you begin to break ground on phase 1, you know that the financing is in place for phase 2, and it can all move forward seamlessly, even though the first building would be completed first, everybody would move into that, and then the second phase would get built. So that's just my my sort of approach to it, and I look forward to this project coming back. I want to thank you. Any other follow-up questions or comments? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing, and we will move on to the next item. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, item number 2 has been continued to December the 5th. So we are now going on to item number 3, 2209, 2215 El Camino Real, request by Karen Kim on behalf of Tai Ning Trading and Innovation Company for major architectural review of a new 8,560 square foot, 3-story mixed-use development on a 5,392 square foot lot to replace an existing 3,803 square foot restaurant and retail use, environmental assessment exempt from the provisions of CEQA per CEQA guideline section 15.332. And I'm sorry, what I don't see on here is
Zone District CC2.
The zones district. What is it?
CC2.
CC2. Okay. It's not in the agenda, so yeah. I just read the agenda. So with that, we will have staff introduce the item.
Good morning. The request, as noted, is to conduct a major architectural review of a new 8,560 square foot, 3-story mixed-use development on a 5,392 square foot lot to replace an existing 3,803 square foot restaurant and retail use. The proposed ground floor would be a financial institution or intensive retail use, and upper floor office and residential use. At the street level, 2 main entries on El Camino Real proposed, one for the ground floor bank and the second floor office entry. A College Avenue entrance is also proposed for the bank. Stone cladding on the ground floor exterior provides substantial appearance for the bank and office functions. The entrances are positioned to create a lively and pedestrian-friendly streetscape along both streets. The second and third floors are cladded in a lightweight articulated glass curtain wall and step back periodically to create a well-shaped balconies, also breaking up the massing of the upper floors. Light shelves are proposed on each level to help contain solar gains and modulate natural light reaching the internal spaces. On June 6th, the Architectural Review Board conducted a preliminary review of the project application. The ARB was supportive of the project. The applicant has incorporated all of the suggestions into the project design as noted in the staff report. However, staff is recommending this item be continued to December 19th to allow the applicant sufficient time to prepare revised drawings meeting the parking facility requirements. The issue with the parking facility as described by staff is that the proposed vertical tandem parking lift system does not meet the backup clearance, required removal of another vehicle in order for a vehicle to park, and utilized an outdoor parking lift system. These are not allowed in Palo Alto. The applicant will be required to revise the parking layout to address this. It does appear that the parking requirements could be met with modifications as suggested by staff. As stated, staff is recommending continuance to the December 19th ARB meeting. We would suggest that you comment on the design and take public testimony at this time and continue it to December 19th. Thank you. And the applicant is also here, the presentation.
What we'll do is we will follow the same procedure as before. We'll do a presentation by the applicant, followed by the opening the public hearing. and then we will return to the board, and I will again abbreviate everybody's time by 5 minutes, and we'll go for multiple rounds until everybody's had a chance to speak on make all their comments. So with that, if you would kindly introduce yourself, and then you'll have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, all. We are representing the owner, the concept designer, and also the ultimate tenants and end user, occupants of the building. Thank you for the time. We are glad to be back after almost 2 years of coordination, research, investigation with the staff, and being able to present to the board here back in June for the preliminary review. We took very seriously every single comment that we received back in June, and as you may see in the more detailed submission, we did respond every single one of them with what we believe to be a contribution or response to other messages. Yet, for those of you who may not recall the earlier presentation, we are proposing a mixed-use 3-story capital improvement new building at 2209 to 2215 El Camino Real. That does balance a mixed use kind of like contribution to the city. That does balance between a very context-oriented approach to understanding the forces in the site, and also want to bring the notion of innovation, mixed use, and modern living and sustainable design to this community. The left button.
There we go.
Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, yeah, the rollerball looks pretty well. So this exhibit is taking a look at the architectural context around the site. We looked at other corner conditions for mixed-use buildings. We looked at the language, how the corners were treated. We were inspired by some of the openness that we saw, the ability to bring green into the spaces, and also to step back and enjoy the opportunity for outdoor exposure. And as you'll see, all of these features have been incorporated into the design. We also took heed. The original scheme that we showed had a very busy exterior with a wide range of materials used in different ways, and we've calmed that exterior down with a very strong ground floor and then lighter weight, but harmonized exterior on the upper levels.
The existing buildings constitute both a one-story restaurant and also a lock shop at the corner. Both buildings are deemed to be non-historic by the staff of Palo Alto. And if we take a closer look at the actual site with a panoramic coming from El Camino Real, we can see that this actually it's a site that has a pretty strong corner condition with vehicle driving along El Camino Real, going more from the north west to the southeast. And to explain about our concepts that contribute to the design, you can see that we try to understand that, yes, we are in a very major active arterial with El Camino Real, yet we also very much recognize that there's a residential neighborhood behind us, even though right to the north of our site it's a church building. Yet we also want to work with the massing in a conceptual diagram form to really integrate the concepts of California Avenue, of mixed use, of downtown Palo Alto, and the language we see in El Camino Real to the design by moving the massing more towards El Camino Real, reinforcing that the ground floor can contribute to bank or retail use by adding office mix to the second floor, and also as we go up, continue to have some form of further setback more from the residential, and at the same time also understand that there are also going to be pedestrian traffic. So we also want to make sure that with the walking traffic, we provide a good access and a good exposure to the indoor-outdoor condition. And then you can also see that as we move up to the second and third floor, we carry the theme of bringing more greenscape and also having some breakage in the form to make sure that as you later on will hear, to also work with the sustainability, because most of the sites is facing south and west. So we actually have conducted energy simulation to help understand how best to balance and minimize energy load.
So this is looking at the what exists on the site currently at the top and the new building at the bottom. You can see that we've tried to step back the building as it faces the residences, and also to provide greenscape. We've introduced some green walls and balconies with vegetation so that the building will not have such a harsh commercial appearance from the residential perspective. And yet on the corner with El Camino, it is a very commercial and inviting looking facade.
If we walk you through the design or the partie of the building, as the staff mentioned, we also work very closely with Palo Alto team to understand that because of the California district, Avenue district, we do have 18 parking spots that are pre-dedicated, pre-assessed. So I think, so we take that into account. We notice that we do need to, similar to the existing site, which even it's only a one, even though there are ongoing kind of like along the whole El Camino Real, they all do integrate, along the whole lane at the back, central lane. Every building does have a few parking spaces behind. We also noticed that the building right next door to us also have some tandem parking, and in some cases a tandem parking that actually it's in front of a handicap parking. So we look into a lot of those scenarios and see what there is an existing curb cut, for example, that does offer the existing site one parking over there. And as the staff mentioned, we have presented a number of schemes of how the parking would work. Almost 2 months ago, when we submitted the major architectural review submission, we presented a car lift scheme, which we saw as one example that is working in downtown San Francisco, among other places. And just about 2 days ago, we noticed that Palo Alto would not allow for such a scheme. So a lot of these schemes are what we hope we can get the major approval today, and let us work with the staff to make sure that the parking would work. In any case, the first floor will include a bank, will include access to the second and third floor, and then as we move on to the second floor, you can see that we introduced the concept of the colonnade, where the deck and the green terraces can take place. Office on the second floor. Moving to the third floor will be a 2-bedroom residential unit. So I think, and also in the roof and throughout the building, we are also investigating into the life cycle payback of integrating solar panel or photovoltaic to also see how we can not only meet the Cal Green requirements, but do above and beyond that. So there are some sections which are also in your packets that you can see. In short, we did respond to many of the ARB preliminary concerns by simplifying the facade, by looking into better circulation, by moving the curb cut further away, and so responded to a lot of those. A lot of the concerns from June was that the facade was good, but a little bit too busy, and so we took a lot of those comments very seriously. In closing, we'd like to also talk about some concept about sustainability. In that we have gone through some energy simulation, understand the exact context of the building, the use, and so the idea of how we came up with the offset on the second and third floor, how we created those buffer, and also where you can see as the solar panel, as the breeze-soleil are all also under our engineering to understand how best to integrate sustainability.
Could you please wrap it up?
Sure.
We'll have questions.
Okay, and then you can see that the material palette does respond to what we see along El Camino Real, along pretty much that whole block, and also with precedents that we see from both our nearby Stanford University, where personally I also teach and work at, and also Berkeley, where my colleague Tony also has drawn some good precedents to inspire our design.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, what we'll do is we will open the public hearing. I have one speaker card. If there are any other speaker cards, please fill them out and hand them to staff. The first speaker is Doria Suma. Welcome, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and board members. I'm Doria Suma, and I live in College Terrace. And I wanted to thank you for letting me speak to this today. And I'm glad that staff has recommended continuing to December. Seems like a good idea. I do have concerns about some of the analysis of impacts of the project at 220915 El Camino that are presented to you today, though I don't have objections to the building or the size or anything like that. I guess maybe some of those questions could have been cleared up by a CEQA review, but I'll leave that to staff. I'd also like to thank staff for responding to my request for information, though I got it yesterday at 5 in an email form, so I haven't had a chance really to look at it. I'm concerned that the packet doesn't evaluate the present conditions as thoroughly as it could in terms of environmental impacts. Some of the same concerns were brought up by the public at a recent hearing of 260 California Avenue, so I supplied that discussion for you at places. And then parking. The building is underparked by 18 spots. The 18 are allocated to the closest public garage, which is on Cambridge Avenue. So I believe that the hourly use and monthly permitted uses of the garages is on a first-come, first-served basis, and staff has recently stated that they cannot allocate specific spots for specific businesses in the garages. So it's back to where are these cars really going to be parked? There's a really large number of projects in and around the Cal Ave, Page Mill Road area. In the pipeline, approved or anticipated, I've made a list of 16, and I could email that to you if you'd like it. So there hasn't been any analysis of the cumulative parking or traffic impacts, so please, I think the public needs to understand where these cars are actually going to go. And it doesn't seem like there's any place right now except on the adjacent streets in residential neighborhoods that don't have the benefit of residential parking permit programs. So I would just ask you to ask staff to clear up some of these questions and maybe address those issues more thoroughly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And just so you know, this item will be continued to December 19th. So you'll have another opportunity to speak. Then we'll keep the public hearing open. If there are any other members of the public wishing to speak to this item? Okay, with that, I will return to the board for questions and comments. You will each have 5 minutes apiece. And again, we want to keep this more of a dialogue than anything. So we're not going to be making any recommendation today. We'll begin with Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Thanks for bringing the project forward. When I first reviewed the project, when I got it at the end of last week, I had some serious concerns about the back side of the project. If you're coming from College towards El Camino, looking at the back, And now I see that there are some fundamental design changes happening as a result of the location and number of parking stalls. So I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like, and I had serious concerns to begin with. That backside, viewed coming up College, it looks very utilitarian. And this building really needs to be seen as a three-sided building, because there's very good visibility on that side. So I would ask you to take a careful look at that and make it more friendly to the neighborhood. My concerns in the design that was presented to us in the original packet are that there's a big rear cantilever going on. Those upper floors, just, I'm sure structurally they work, but they appear unsupported, and they're sitting over parking. So it doesn't feel well grounded. I would like to see more contextual information. When this does become a formal review, we need to make findings that state that it is compatible with the local and adjacent buildings. And they're really just seen in little snippets in your presentation. So if we can have some really good analysis of how they relate, that would be helpful to us. The building design itself is a very clean line design. However, the second and third floors, to me, feel a little bit weak. There's big insets for balconies, which I think will be wonderful spaces for the tenants and residents. But if they feel as if they need to be framed or something special needs to be made out of them, they just right now are voids. So you've got glass, void, glass, and it feels to me that it needs more design attention. The bioswale, I'll want to see a lot more information on how that works. I think you've got lavender and rock rose proposed for the bioswale. Right now, I'm not convinced that really works. So I'd like a good analysis of the appropriate planting for that and which plants go where. There was a notation about a transformer. Has there been a change, Margaret, in the way the transformer is being treated?
Yes, there has been a change. They are moving the transformer to be able to put a parking space back there.
So they're going to be using an existing transformer rather than having one on their
Exactly.
site? Okay, that's a great improvement. There's also a mention on the site plan about a 6-foot allowable stair encroachment. Does staff agree with that analysis?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay. Board Member Pop.
Thank you very much for coming forward with this application, and I'll say first and foremost that I'm really pleased at the attention you've paid to all the comments that we had, and appreciate your effort and time spent addressing those. It's a great site, and I think that what you're proposing here is really appropriate in terms of the uses. And in many ways, I really see this as a very handsome and a compatible building. But my goal here is to, now that you are in the application process formally and we're looking at a major review, is to give you some very specific comments from my perspective to help you focus your effort and get us to a point where we can approve this project for you and move it forward. So I know we've got 5 minutes. I'm going to use 5 minutes a few times here probably. First, I know we're not the Planning Commission here, and parking is not our issue. But there is not enough parking for this building. And I think that as a building owner and a designer, you should seriously think about whether you have enough parking to make this building successful. Because the number of spaces that you're proposing relative to the types of uses that you're talking about, I think are going to be very challenging in the long run. And comments that I'm aware of from the neighborhood and from others are clear, and I think you should really think about that. I know we were given an updated parking layout today, and I really haven't had an opportunity to understand that or evaluate that. It looks to me like there's a tandem space proposed for a handicap stall, and I can't imagine that that's allowable. So I think that just in terms of your site plan, there's some pretty significant changes that are going to need to be made to accommodate the parking. And so I'm not going to get too deep into that, but I think that there's quite a bit of change that's going to happen there. But I will say that in regard to the lifts that you had at the rear proposed previously, if you do decide to go back to that idea, that the concept of exposing those lifts in the way that you have is not comfortable for me, and that I would be very challenged to accept that. It would set a precedent that I'm not really comfortable going forward with. That, in conjunction with not having them screened off of College Avenue, I respect the fact that there's an alley back there, and having them open to the alley, that seems more tolerable. But to have them visible from College Avenue seemed like a little too much to me. We need to see details for your building. There needs to be many details in this packet, and without identifying a specific project or a specific architect that applies it, what I'd like to ask you to do is talk to your planner and maybe get some examples of some of the drawing sets that we often see so that you can understand the kind of detail that we're looking for. I think that there's a number of elements here that I need to see more of in order to really understand the building. I'll start with again, at the back of the building, as you're putting all these pieces together, there are some just physical elements that I don't see incorporated that are really going to affect how this building is designed, and I think will alter what you're needing to do. We need to see covered enclosed trash areas that function. We need to see accessible path of travel from the accessible stall to the entryways that isn't encroached on by where dumpsters might be sitting. Things like that have to be carefully thought through. And so we'll look to you to really come forward with that for us. I didn't see bicycle storage on the site. Did I miss it, or is it there? Maybe yeah. Please step forward and why don't you tell me where it is?
Yeah, there are some bike racks on the floor plan. There should be some bike racks.
And are they only required to have a bike rack, or do they need to have some storage units as well? Are there type 1 and type 2 storage requirements?
Yeah, they're required to have bike rack, and so they are providing 3 bike racks on College Avenue.
Okay, but no requirement for type the bike lockers?
No. Typically, we do require, lockers. I'm not sure if we'll check in with transportation staff and make sure that they looked at that aspect. It is a small building, but I would think, certainly the residential units could have, storage of their own bikes in their own units. But the commercial,
have you had that discussion at all with transportation?
Our understanding is that we are required to have bike rack, so that's, but not lockers. But
it's actually on the drawing set that you're required to have 2 long-term and 1 short-term.
But where are
and it depends on the use of the ground floor. So like the banks actually do require long-term. It's like a 60-40. It depends on the use on what they're using the ground floor, but they are required, and it's not shown. The locker is not shown.
Great. Alex, thank you very much.
What I would say is if we are having this multiple potential use, which I understand, the use may change over time between one thing and another, we should have, like we do with the landscape reserve parking, they should show where a bike locker would be if it were to be bank. Maybe it doesn't need to be provided for another use, but where would it be located?
Okay, Board Member Guyer.
Okay, I wasn't here for the first go-around on this, but I have a couple of basic things. I noticed in the application, first of all, that when I guess when I initially saw the thing and I saw the exterior parking racks, if you want to call them, I thought it was an auto repair service place. I mean, I'm sorry, but I agree. There's no way I could approve this project if those things were exposed. And especially on the residential side, that if somebody's driving up Colgate, it would see that on a regular basis. Then also, just from an application standpoint, I don't really want to be given an option saying, here's 4 options, pick one. You're the designer. I need you to say this is what we're going to use, and then make me. I'm looking at like on sheet A18. You're talking about shading system options. I don't want you to give me 4 options. I want you to say this is the one we're going to use. The design of the building, again, I wasn't here on the first go around, but I have some concerns about it. It has a rounded corner, but it's really the only curve on the entire project other than that sort of strange wall at the entry inside that's curved. And again, I don't see the reason for that being curved either, other than just to tighten up the entryway. I don't see it. The parking in the back is a fiasco. I mean, I'm sorry. First of all, 2 of those parking spaces are given to the residents upstairs. So you've got this hodgepodge right in the entryway with a tandem space in front of a handicap space. I mean, it literally is an afterthought, the whole parking. I'm having real difficulty, let alone even saying that there is or isn't enough parking on the site. The amount of parking that's there isn't handled properly, or isn't handled carefully enough to really make it realistic. Because, if there's a handicap, or I should say a disabled person parked in that spot, it eliminates the one in front of it. Now, you can mandate possibly the tenant on the second floor, or I should say mandate that their staff park in the parking structure. You're not going to be able to do that on the first floor, nor in fact are you going to be able to do it to the people that live on the third floor. I mean, those 2 spaces theoretically may just go unused because they want to park on the street somewhere. I'm just having a real problem with that. I noticed in some of the literature that I guess one of the concerns was that the elevations were too busy, and so you were asked to tone it down a little bit. I think it's still a little busy, but the reality of it is it's now a relatively bland box that has some real busy articulation on it. I'm not really a fan of that. It literally looks like a rectangular box with one curved corner, and it really doesn't do anything for me in that respect. The stairway on the back, I'm assuming the way it looks is that the back stairway is the only way for the resident to get up to their, I mean, other than the elevator, of course. But I would, I would assume that if I was living in that, I wouldn't always want to trudge through the public lobby to get into the to go up to my residence. I'd want to go up the, my own private stairway. And the one in the back literally is sort of a door approach where it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we did, provide you an entrance way around the back in between the parking spaces in the garbage chute or whatever. I don't think it's any real benefit to the person living on the third floor. It's a 2-bedroom unit, but it's a huge 2-bedroom unit. I mean, at 2,700 square feet for a 2-bedroom unit, well, whatever.
It's not that.
I just find that it could be a very luxurious residence up there, but the entry getting into it, I don't think matches that ambiance. Let's see. I think that's it for right now.
Okay.
Okay, Board Member Liu?
Great. So thank you for your presentation. I think that you've made a lot of progress since your last submittal. And I think basically, I think the partie has gotten a lot better, even though it seems like there are still some issues. And I think generally I can support like a 3-story mixed-use building. And I do have some concerns that have been expressed by the other board members on the parking for a bank. If that's the use, it seems like the scheme with the. I think the thing with the parking lifts is that it's fine for like offices or maybe residential. But if you have like a bank and you've got customers coming in, then that raises a whole other issue. As well, also I think you were saying is possibly in the future it could be like a restaurant, and then that would also be problematic. I have just a general question: do you have a landscape architect, and you're showing plans you're showing the planters on the first and second floors, and then you're also showing like a planted canopy over the parking, and there aren't really a lot of details about that, and so I was wondering what you were thinking about those areas.
Should we respond that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. No, we are only working with the concept architect right now. We do want to get some confirmation through the ARB before we engage the landscape architect and all the additional professionals beyond the existing concept architect.
Okay, so my main concern is that I would like to see is that for the planting is that how is that being maintained, and also is the plants. You're only showing like 1 foot deep planters on the facade on the facades, which is very narrow. So that seems to be very limiting in the types of plants that you can put in there. And also rooftop plants often get a lot of abuse. They get in addition to sun, they get reflected light off of the walls and wind. And so oftentimes, it's depending on the plant, maybe you need to water it every day. And also, how do you maintain it, especially if it's on the second floor? And there's without easy access to it. So I would like that, just some of the logistics of that to be presented to us. Also on the building, I think, I like the clean lines and the proportions and everything on this. It seems a little, the signage I think that you're conceptually showing is a little tricky to me for El Camino. It's very pedestrian oriented, which is good. I think it's harder if a tenant really wants to have like a automobile drive-by 40-mile-an-hour visibility. You don't have that many places where if they wanted some sort of illuminated signs. You're showing things that are all sort of hung off of the building, which I like those. I see those in San Francisco a lot in South Market, and I think they're very cool. But I think generally we see here on El Camino, which is a little bit more auto-oriented, that there's some need to address the drive-by traffic too. On the, the inside of the building is not really doesn't have our peer review, but I would just caution you to make if you haven't already, is to go through the code things carefully in there. I didn't look at it in great detail, but I was just thinking exiting and all of that kind of stuff. You're showing things that that I don't normally see, and so I just want you to be really careful about it. Just like the exit stairs and how that all works. Also, too, I think Board Member Hoppe, I would want to see more details on this. Normally we have typical window wall details if there are where different materials meet, and let's see, what else do I have? Back to a second on landscaping. It seems like you're eliminating one of the curb cuts on College Avenue, which is great. I was wondering, too, if there's a way of adding more landscaping to there. It would be great. Any opportunity, I think, would be great if it doesn't conflict. If an additional street tree, if that doesn't conflict with the existing utilities that are there. Also, I was curious if you've met with like the Evergreen Park and the College Terrace neighborhood associations. Oh, we can wait till the. Oh, okay. Yeah, if you've actually met with the neighborhood groups as part of your design process. No. Okay.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for returning and addressing our comments. I think that I want to be very encouraging here what you've presented here visually in terms of the scheme here is much more desirable than what you had previously. I think this is a vast improvement. You've taken our comments very seriously. Where I have some concerns is with the parking. While we don't regulate the number of parking spaces, that's really done by the staff, planning staff. Anything that's visual in terms of the parking, quality and character issues is what we really have the purview over. And in this case, this is akin to having a beautiful appliance and then sort of seeing the battery cover left off or something. It's just not a very attractive approach. In addition to that, I think that the back side of the building probably could be a little more responsive to the alleyway behind it, Cedro Lane. It's on an angle, but you've sort of brought the building in. I know that there are setbacks associated with that, but it really can sort of follow the property line maybe. And it doesn't really do that. So the back side of the building, I think, as Board Member Malone Pritchard had indicated, is that we really need to see a three-sided solution. We need to see all visible sides of the building addressed. And the complication that you have is that parking is not terribly attractive. So that needs to be addressed. It has to be done in a way that the parking does work. There are a number of tools that you have available to you. The first one, which of course is the most costly one, is to put in some underground parking. We've had sites that are actually smaller, well, actually about the same size as this. It is pretty small, but it's the size of the one over on Waverly, the parse.
Yeah, and the way things happen there, we're not. There's a long story.
Yeah.
But certainly, I'm going to weigh in here because certainly there is a concept that would allow puzzle lifts off the alley with the below grade,
right.
Serving as they could probably add a couple spaces that way through the use of puzzle lifts. But I mean that is an expensive option.
Yeah. So I think that there are ways of looking at the parking here. Another tool that might be available to you, and I don't want to speak for staff, but off-site parking agreement. If they can find an adjacent parcel where you can share the parking or have it dedicated to this site is another opportunity.
If I can weigh in again,
Sure.
Technically it doesn't have to be adjacent. It has to be just within 500 feet of the assessment district, so it can be quite a ways off, technically.
Okay. So
Though I don't know what capacity there is out there of finding such a place. But anyways, it's an option.
Okay. So there are ways of getting this maybe to work. You get more utility of your building that way as well. The third thing that I just wanted to mention is, I know that the PTOD district goes up to Cambridge, but this is a couple of parcels away from Cambridge. Does PTOD extend to that area?
Yeah, I'd have to take a look. I can certainly, grab a zoning map from upstairs and see, what we've got here. I didn't look at that before the meeting, or we can look at it before the next meeting.
Okay. What I'm suggesting here is because this is in the approximate area of what we have called pedestrian transit overlay district, you could have the parcel rezoned. It's a process through the Planning Commission. It might be available.
Yeah, if it were available and they were to come through for a rezoning to make this parcel actually a PTOD zone, then they're restricted to a very small amount of commercial. So that would, pretty much take their whole pro forma and, make it a residential project with a little bit of retail.
Okay. So that's something maybe you might want to look at. You can still get the square footage. You actually might get the same amount of square footage or more, but it would have to be residential. Okay. So we'll go for a second round of comments here. We'll start with Board Member Malone Pritchard. Do you have anything else to add?
Just one thing, a couple of other board members have mentioned the arrangement of the interior stairs. It's always nice if you can to express the vertical circulation on the exterior of the building if you can. Not sure that I'm seeing much of that here. I do see something at the front of the building for the main lobby, but just to make it very obvious how you get around. And do take a look at the code issues, because there are some strange things going on with those paths of travel through the stairs all the way to the ground.
Okay, Board Member Pop.
Thank you. First for staff. I understand they're allowed to encroach the stair. Do these planted overhangs that are encroaching comply as well?
Yes, they also apply.
Okay, that's great. And as we're talking about the overhangs in the back, I wanted to ask you about these AC units that you have in the back of the building. And it looks like there might be a little bit of a coordination issue, or maybe I'm just not seeing them, but I don't see those on the elevations in the back of the building. And so we're going to need to understand what you're doing with those AC units, if they're screened, what decibel level they produce, because there are strict noise requirements for units like that. And we'll just want to make sure we understand what the condition of those are. I couldn't agree more with Alex about the trees on College. As I walk the site out there, there's a rhythm on the opposite side of College that's present, and it's there's some hiccups and starts and stops on your side. And so I'd really like to ask you to seriously look at an opportunity to recreate that rhythm in front of your building. Again, for staff, I think one of the things I'm going to ask you to take a look at is the light fixtures that they proposed. On the sheet that they describe their light fixtures, they're very clear about saying, talking about conformance with all the night sky issues and all of our regulations, but the fixture itself appears to me to not be compatible with that. It looks like it's going to just blow light out into the walkway, and so we just need to make sure that the choices that they've got are compatible. I want to go back to some of the technical issues that I think might affect your design. What kind of elevator are you using? Because I don't see any elevator equipment up on the roof, and I know there are machine roomless units. Typically I see those in bigger buildings, but is that what you're intending to use here, or is there?
We can double check with our designer.
Okay. Yeah, just make sure you've got enough room for your machine room equipment if you need it. And I'll echo the comments of others here again. You really need to check the exiting. As I quickly looked at that, I'm quite concerned about whether you'd be allowed to exit through a laundry room, and whether the elevator lobby itself can be open to both the stair and the elevator at the same time. You'll need to have a device that would close off that elevator shaft in the case of an emergency. So let me talk a little bit about the exterior of the building. Again, I'm very pleased with the direction the building has gone, and I think you've made some really great headway from where you started. And so I'm really looking at details. I'm not looking at overall design at this point, because I think you're in a pretty good place. I agree with Claire's comments about the balconies and what that's doing with the elevation, and so looking at that a little bit will be helpful. Adjacent to your entryway, as I'm facing the building, on the right-hand side next to the Sphinx building, there's a large panel that goes all the way up the building on that side, and I'm wondering if you might pull that back up at the third level. There's a nice part of that building next door that steps back a little bit, and helps to bring the height down, and I'm wondering if that might, detaching that from your roof might actually make your roof stronger. And just take a look at that. Alex's comment about the 1-foot planter was something that was bothering me as well. And I'll just talk it through briefly. If we're talking about raised planters, as I think you're showing, and we've got only a foot, and you've got 4 inches and 4 inches of structure on either side of that, you've got like 4 inches left for planting. And so the reality of what you're going to have there isn't really going to work. And so I think you need to look at that carefully. Responding to the adjacent building. Again, you know, there's some nice windows and things on that building that are on the side of the building, and when I look at the elevation that you've got that faces that building, it's really a pretty tough response, and I think that looking at where those windows are is important to consider. What's happening right now is your stair is virtually exactly where that opening is on the adjacent building. And so not only does that occur at all of your levels, but you're actually elevating your roof at that point to get out of that stair. And so in the one spot where they have an opportunity to get some light into the side of their building, you've got your tallest element completely blocking it. And I'd like you to consider that a little bit. If I can have just one more moment. The height of that element, it's not a mechanical unit. It's really just for a stair. The height that they're showing that goes above the 37 feet, is there an issue with that? Just one.
The stair going above 37 feet?
Right.
Let's see.
Their
we
roof access
are
stair.
allowed to projections 15 feet above the height limit for certain things, and yeah, that's kind of an ongoing debate with us. So we'll have to take a look. If you're, is it clear? Is it right now over the 37 feet?
It is over the 37 feet, and it's clearly not from mechanical. Right.
Okay,
the mechanical units are adjacent to that, but not within that, as far as I can tell. Is that correct? Mechanical units are screened separately, and this is just this little pop-up that they've got really just allows the stair to get up to the roof.
So if it wasn't factored in as floor area, I guess, right, it's a height issue. Yeah, I'm thinking ahead. If we needed to do a DEE, if that was something that was desirable,
exactly what I was going to suggest.
Then the problem is it floor area? You know, we have to look into that.
So what I was going to suggest is there is definitely a vehicle for this to work. You know, the question is, where is it, and can you make the findings that allow for it? So I'll pass it on now and come back to me when you can.
Okay. Board Member Guyer, pass? Yeah. Board Member Liu?
Yes, I was wondering if you could bring material samples of the glass, the fritted glass, and also you're showing like a stone tile. Maybe is it like a limestone or a porcelain? I don't know what you were thinking about for the first floor, but normally we like to see actual samples of those materials. And then also too, I think you're showing some like a perforated metal roof screen. I think was called out. I'm not sure it showed in the elevations, but also a sample of that, because really, and also be specific on the like percentage openings of the screens, because some of them are very, very open and almost like transparent, and then others are almost opaque. So, and then we've had some applicants submit perforated metals that were, I guess they were painted. They weren't just aluminum. So the actual finish of that would be good too. Thank you.
Yeah. So continuing with my previous line of questioning, again, I find what you've done here far more desirable than what you previously shown. So I'm very in support of what you're doing. I think the backside of the building needs to be addressed, and the parking issue. And just sort of following up is that on the corner, why not have the entrance to the bank, on the corner? You really only need one main entrance to the bank portion. Having it on the corner there, recessed, reinforces the corner in some ways. And then you have the rear entrance, to the bank, for exiting purposes. Did you look at that?
We actually, should we respond now?
Yeah, sure.
We actually did look at that, and the reason was that the more we look at the sites, we thought that that corner was more for vehicle to see. The actual people going are more likely coming from either side. So, and also we tried a couple of schemes and find out that that corner condition, if we start to break it, it starts to kind of like not have such a clean corner, which is what we're trying to maintain. So yes, we have been going back and forth with those two approach.
Because the next question I have is, another possibility is the more of the facade that you eat up with doors, you're actually creating internal circulation issues. And so it becomes much harder if it's a bank and you have offices, they generally want to be towards an exterior window sometimes. Why not have the entrance to the bank inside your lobby? You have a rather generous and deep lobby there. That could be reinforced or identified as the main entrance to the building with, again, an exterior set of doors there that get you right into the bank. And then that way you're able to actually landscape or buffer the outside of the building a little bit more. Did you look at that?
Not this particular option, but but yes, we will be glad to take a close look into those options.
Okay. So with that, I will. Those are all of my comments. I'm not going to return for myself. I know that there are some other board members that have some additional comments. Board member Pop?
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Sorry, I'm got a lot today, but I do want to try and give you everything so that when you come back, you're really prepared. I would like to understand what activities you're planning for the roof and what types of elements might ultimately be living up there. If it's residential, are you going to be putting barbecues up there and umbrellas and what is going to go on up there? So if you can share with us when you come back if there's furnishings that you're planning up there with the glass railing and it being quite visible. Really want to understand what the use you're planning up there is. Although Board Member Gouillet says he doesn't like to see options, he wants you to tell us what it is. I'll tell you that what I prefer for your options for your canopies is I'd like to see glass at the first level and perforated metal up above. I think that's what makes the most sense in terms of functionality for pedestrians that are walking by, for solar shading, all of those things. For my personal, since you're asking, that's where I'd go.
Just a question. So, what about fritted glass on upper levels?
Fine as well, but I think that fritted glass comes with its own series of issues, right? It collects dirt, and from up above, it's at times unsightly, and so I'm more in favor of the perforated metal, just because the water, when it occurs, passes through it. The evening dew that collects and then dries during the day doesn't tend to have as much of a visual impact on it as just the perforated metal. So that's my 2 cents. I love the idea that you've taken the drainage for the building and really concealed it the way you have. But I'll just tell you that I often joke around with my clients that 99% of architecture is just keep the water out, right? That's a huge amount of our job. And I'm just going to caution you that what you're doing is tough, really tough. And if you're going to change your mind about doing this, do it now so that we can see where those drainage lines will go, if indeed you do decide to change your mind about that. And then one last thing that I'll bring up, and it's a minor thing, but often we're challenged a little bit because we see what looks like residential units that ultimately get used as office space, and where we're asked to review something that is only parked with 2 cars, and then you get 10 people in a space working as an office. And it may have just been an oversight on your part, but there's no kitchen in your unit. You're showing lots of living space, but there's no kitchen. And I just want to make sure that what we're seeing here is really going to be a residential unit. So just need to make sure that when this comes back, there's some double checking about that, please.
Yeah, and this has come up in other projects of the very large residential one unit. We've had, for instance, on Lytton, there's a big penthouse. I mean, I've been up to them and they have the kitchen. Whether it's a full-time residence of somebody is a question, but certainly a condition of approval when we get to that point to restrict it to residential use would be critical.
That's great, Amy. Thank you very much. And then I do think one last thing that I would like to add to this is that in the conditions for this project in particular, because of all of the construction in the area, and particularly because there's such an awareness right now of traffic issues and parking challenges and all kinds of things that are going on, really having a very clear construction logistics plan for this site that minimizes its impact on the neighboring streets and people who travel up and down the lane and around this project is going to be just so critical that really want to make sure that that's a component of what's getting done here, because part of this is how you come to the neighborhood, not just what you end up with. Thank you.
Any other board members' questions or comments? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing. Do we need to take action to continue this item?
I think it would be nice so that we don't have to, advertise it again and pay that extra public funds for advertising. Just continue it to a date certain by vote to the 19th. Assuming that date will be, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I will make a motion that we continue this item to December 19th. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, Board Member Guyer. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. That's 5-0-0. And with that, we will move on. 500 University Avenue has been continued to December 5th. If there's any members of the public that have come here specifically to speak to this item, they may do so. Are you here to speak to? Yeah. Yeah, you may do so. I'll introduce the item. 500 University Avenue, request by Theuts Brothers, Inc., for major architectural review to allow the construction of a new 26,806 square foot, 3-story office and retail building in the CDC GFP zone district, replacing the 1-story, 15,899 square foot commercial building, environmental assessment exempt from provisions of CEQA per CEQA guidelines, section 15332. And you may, if you could state your name, you'll have 3 minutes to speak to this item.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson and board members. I'm Gulrukh Vakil. I have had a small business in Palo Alto since 1974, making me one of the oldest small businesses. I will continue talking on December 5th, but the reason I wanted to say a few words right now is because I was looking at the minutes, and I've been slightly misquoted here, and it's my public speaking fault, of course. I just want to amend, for the record, I just want to amend what is written in the minutes, where it says that I'm supportive of the project. What I really tried to say was that I'm supportive of a project of mixed-use building as shown to be good for small businesses. I'm not particularly in favor of the trend that is going on in Palo Alto, but of course what I said was that it's a matter of progress, it's a matter of demand, and you can't really avert these sort of changes. As far as mixed use is concerned, what I'm opposed to is large corporation type of situations. When it says there's retail on the ground floor, really I'm seeing enormous retail spaces that only large corporations can rent, and we know what's happened to a lot of these. They come and they go, whereas small businesses have stayed forever. And so I'm more in favor of more smaller spots on the ground floor. Same for residential and office. The spaces are gigantic for a small town like Palo Alto, and that is not conducive to bringing in certain types of businesses and opening up residences for a lot of smaller people. So I just wanted to clear that for the record, that that is what I was intending to say, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Can I just clarify that? I think that at the last meeting, you spoke about 429 University Avenue, although I think, just at the moment we were talking about 500 University Avenue, but I think the comments apply to both conceptually.
Right. I think my comments are in general.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you're certainly welcome to come back and speak on this item or any other item in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. Okay, so with that, we will move on to board items. Number 5, El Camino Real guideline discussion. And what I'd like to do is address the board. Basically, we're going to, unfortunately, I think, be behind the 8 ball in terms of scheduling and working through a number of issues. The first one is looking at sidewalks. Number 2, looking at the height. And number 3, looking at the El Camino Real guidelines. And I just wanted to get an update from staff because we really would like to try to actually say move forward and then bring this forward at a retreat in the new year. So if we can talk about that.
Sure. So we're suffering a little bit in the fact that we don't have any consultant dollars in our kitty. We've exhausted the money, the $10,000 we did have allocated. Too much information, but so now it's just staff, and currently I'm understaffed because we promoted somebody. So, long story, we have less staff to help in this effort at this moment. However, I want to say that I'm going to be putting some significant effort into this project. One of the things that's going to come first to you will be the build-to line conundrum that we have in both our El Camino Real guidelines and the code that specifies that a building must be placed at the 0 property line, or 0 to whatever 5 feet setback to create an 8-foot 12-foot effective sidewalk from curb to building face. And for instance, we just went to council, as you know, on the 3159 project, where they needed to get a design enhancement exception to put the building farther back from the street, which is a goal of the council and the public to see buildings not quite so far forward. So I believe that effort that I'll be personally putting in on getting an ordinance together to fix that, that will probably be one of the things I bring in a draft form for the study session to get your comments. Now, having said that, and it's an ordinance, there may be some other things we can do, put in there as we discuss that. The project that went on Monday night to council got some high marks for setting the building back at the upper levels and some other things. So I think there may be room for conversation based on land use, a mixed-use project, say, about what form code in a way, or performance, what seems to work well. So, I guess think about all the projects we've been seeing that are mixed use, think about what works well, and maybe have some kind of concept there to talk about. As far as the taking apart the nodes along El Camino, I know we have an outstanding assignment to pull together parcel reports, and we haven't managed to do that for you. I'm sorry. We may have some opportunity in the near future. We are looking at staffing up, getting some technicians at the development center, Hopefully we get those in place, and operating by January to help relieve the remaining planners of some of those burdens, the counter shifts and building permit plan checks, so we can work on some of these higher level things. But all I can say is, excuses aside, there is still a focus. Hopefully we can have some consulting help as well, so we're not relying on the ARB to spend your time outside of your work hours to draft things up. So I'll give you an update in January on that at our retreat.
I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, this is something that came forward as a colleague's memo, really from the City Council. And while I'm not a big fan of unfunded mandates, is there a way to at least apprise the City Council that there really is no staff funding for this, that we're struggling with this, we have our own jobs, our own work to do. It is a volunteer effort and labor of love. And in order for this to move forward, we really need some sort of funding. And I think that that's real important to make that very clear to the mayor and
Yes.
the city council.
Yeah, I know. I think, and there's been concepts spoken about this too, the idea of kind of an ARB, informational report about the ARB's workload and this kind of thing. I mean, I think, because this is on our workload as an unfunded mandate for all of us to take on. But I think it would be good to kind of maybe summarize or, have data that the council can understand the volume of work that's been coming through here and, the kinds of things that we're working on just as, as putting on our catcher's mitts and dealing with. So, I think that having some kind of report about, the totality of what we're dealing with, including the El Camino effort and where we, would like to be if we were to have some funding, it would be a good idea.
Any comments from my fellow board members?
I think one of our roles is to provide an annual or maybe it's a twice yearly report to council.
Yeah, I think our bylaws for the ARB may suggest that we do that, or perhaps somewhere else. Can't remember, but it's an ideal, it's a goal. I don't think we've ever actually done it. I know the Planning Commission regularly does it each year. I think it takes a lot of effort from the chair to provide that, but certainly I'm happy
staff, I'm sure.
With my memory and whatever data, I can help prepare something, a 2-pager maybe.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking that might assist us in developing that would be, even if we could ask an administrative individual to go through all of the agendas that we've had for the year and just put together a list of all the projects that we reviewed and what the outcomes were. And I think if we at least had that list as a board, we could go through and start to comment on them. But for me to go back and look at all that and try and remember what I have looked at and where it's gone is more than I can manage.
I'm happy to get that out to you via email in the next couple of weeks.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Board Member Malone Pritchard, do you have anything to add? Board Member Liu?
Well, I just wanted to say that I've been looking at the zoning and the design guidelines, like in between reviews of projects, and it's really confusing. If you're trying to, from my point of view, is if you're trying to understand what the city wants, like El Camino to look like, and you go through the zoning and looking at the different zonings on El Camino, and you realize the height of buildings on El Camino depends on it's not just the zone of that, it depends on what it's next to and all of that. And I'm looking at, when I'm looking at it just sort of in totality, it's really very confused. It's really very convoluted. It's not easy to understand. And I think, and we look at all the projects. I think from the public's point of view, it would be baffling to me why one building is 4 stories, one building's 1 story, one's 2. It doesn't make any sense for the larger public to sort of see where we're going. And so that has been a struggle for me. And if it's we know more about this than anybody else in town. So I think it's been it's been really good to look at it from a different perspective, because we always sort of micromanage each little project, and it was really sort of good to look at it as a big picture issue. And I don't have any great answers, but it's just it's a very difficult problem.
From a staff's perspective, it seems that as we work on all these projects up and down El Camino, that the zoning, as it stands now, was created with a very strong emphasis on trying to be sensitive in terms of that transition between those uses that exist behind those projects on El Camino, and so it does have manifests itself in a staggering effect. You don't have that continuity of height along El Camino because the varying uses behind kind of dictate how high you can go, and so it would be good to take another look at that.
And one of those things, because when that manifests itself as, daylight plane changes from, one parcel to the next, depending on the actual use of the land next door. But there is some concepts for, that could be explored further for consistency. For instance, having that 10-foot landscape buffer. How are we really utilizing that to full effect? Could we maybe make something more consistent along that so that this daylight plane thing could maybe take a turn for something more consistent that doesn't, get so confusing. And then, maybe have more clarifications on the DEEs and what are we doing there, to help those other public officials that, question what the ARB does, why isn't this a variance kind of thing, so we can have more, I think the ARB would be instrumental in coming up with, how that's looked at perhaps, and maybe include that in something for El Camino specifically.
Board Member Guyer, do you have anything to add? Okay. Just in sort of wrapping this up, I think that we are in a very difficult position right now, and this is what I see as the environment. There are a number of citizens that are very discontented with development in the city, that we have one set of rules that we are following, and yet in some ways these rules are out of sync with sort of what the City Council is asking us to begin to look at. And so what I'm afraid of, or where my big concern is, that if we don't hop on this and address it in a timely fashion, we might in fact become extinct and irrelevant to the design process. We could very well be out of a job, and the whole design review could be taken to consultants or at a staff level. And so if we don't develop or correct what the criteria is and make it very clear to the community, I think we're going to have a very difficult time in the coming years. So I just want to, I'm not predicting doom and gloom, I'm just merely putting out there what I think the state of the environment is, and we have a responsibility, if we're going to serve Palo Alto, is that we need to really express our vision for the city in some ways, and what those criteria are. Vice Chair Pop.
Yeah, I'm very aware of the public comment and the discussions that are happening both in the media and specifically about projects with staff and architects, and the challenges right now of trying to design a project that will be compliant with zoning regulations by the time you go to submit your building permit, with what changes might occur between now and then. What might happen in terms of parking rules or any of these things, because it is no longer a given, that the rules are going to stay the same. At the same time, I think that our job as the Architectural Review Board is to look at the rules that we have in front of us, to evaluate projects based on those rules, and to provide the best level of comment and oversight to the applicants possible. And until such time as the rules change, I will continue to evaluate projects based on what I have at hand. And I think that it's very important for everyone who comes to speak at these meetings, for everyone who comes to the city with an application, to understand that there are rules in place that we are following. And the comments that I heard on Monday night at council, particularly from Councilman Klein, who talked, accurately about what that project was not. It's not a PC. It's not, that there was a project that fit squarely within the zoning regulations, and they were evaluating it based on what it was. And I think that's our job as well. And I don't see an irrelevance or a danger to that. I think that that's the most important thing we can be doing right now, is to just stay the course until the course changes, and then we'll change with it.
Board Member Guya?
Yeah, I have one thing that I'm new on this group, but I've been around here long enough that, and I've been on boards before where you can follow the rules and all that sort of thing, but there's still certain aspects of what we do that really have nothing to do with a checklist and marking off various things. It has to do with appearance, style, all these things. And from a lot of the people or the public I hear, they want, Palo Alto to be a certain style and all these things. And city council members, being politicians, listen to that sort of thing. And so we, or at least I think it's sort of strange. We could follow all the rules, do everything exactly presented in front of us, and people are still unhappy because a particular building is, I don't know, too modern or too this or too that, as compared to what, and I think that's one of the problems. And that one, I don't really know how we resolve that.
Yeah, I think this is a much broader discussion. The City Council asked us to look at density and height in terms of being in the downtown as well as some other areas in Palo Alto. They asked us to look at sidewalk setbacks, and then the El Camino Real guidelines, which are really decades old, or really in some ways out of date. And so I don't have any dispute. I'm following the rules based on what we have in front of us. I'm just saying that the criteria that we have, we've been asked to evaluate and explore, and we are just tardy in terms of doing that. And what's happening is because there is an upswell of civic discontent, what I'm afraid of is that what is basically a discretionary review process where we make a recommendation to the director is now being appealed to the city council. And one of two things is going to happen. These will be appealed to city council and it'll fall on deaf ears, or the city council could in fact say, well, you really haven't updated your criteria. You haven't provided us with the input that we've requested. And then we see them taking action as laypersons.
I'd like to weigh in here. I would say that the public and appellants, recent appellants, people aren't even aware that there are context-based guidelines in the zoning code. And I would submit that this group, staff, be hyper cognizant of those context-based criteria, which do, in fact, implement some of those, ideals and goals, along with the ARB findings, and that we are, we do a better job of really looking at context of where these buildings are going, and specifically, ask the applicants to provide, they do provide photos. They do provide the streetscape elevation, and we are looking at, alignment of buildings and such. But I guess, kind of what's the sense of place? There could be some other discussions regarding, that relate to context-based criteria that the ARB could add some value to help the community understand, what's happening to this neighborhood, what's changing. Oh, there's this other project down on the next block. I think if we could kind of put on our urban design hats and think about and talk about and have discussions about that, and maybe it's a study session I'm talking about, to allow a public conversation about that. It seems like sometimes just conversation is helpful, just for people to get out what it is that they're, to try to express in design terms and in other terms what's happening out there really. And what we hear a lot about parking and traffic. Most people notice that, but getting to in the design area, with qualified professionals, to try to maybe have a good conversation about that in the study session. I'm just brainstorming.
Yeah. Any other comments here? Okay. With that, I think this is a very good transition point. We'll go on to board member business and announcements. The first announcement I want to make is I was contacted by Chair Michael of the Planning and Transportation Commission, and he's very interested in putting on a series of sort of public education 101 on planning criteria. And what he thinks could work very well is to put together maybe a series of 3 programs, and it would involve ARB. What we would do is we would break up into and work with planning and transportation staff, and these would be probably a team of 2 planning and transportation commissioners with 2 ARB members working on a segment and actually educating the public on a specific aspect of the planning review process. They could be process-driven criteria, sort of informing the public as to what the comprehensive plan is about. But I just wanted to get a feeling as to how you felt about this and whether I should pursue this, and this would happen in sometime in the new year. Board Member Malone Pritchard.
I think that's a really big need in the community, because I do hear a lot of the public speakers come up and say things where it's clear they haven't really understood what the process is. They don't understand what has happened, what is about to happen, what the next steps are. So anything we can do to help the public understand the process would be a very good thing.
Board Member Pop.
Echo Claire's comments, and I think it speaks directly to Amy's point that many of the people who are coming forward with concerns are not aware of either the tools that we use and their content, or which comments to direct to which board and where they should go with their issues, which group has purview over which items. And I, for one, would be very happy to dedicate some of my time to helping with this.
Board Member Guyer.
Yeah, I agree. Education's always a good thing. I mean, it makes our job easier in the long run.
Okay. Board Member Liu.
I think it's a great idea. It seems tricky to do in Palo Alto. We have so many different processes. I don't know how it would be, how you format it or whatnot, but it seems tricky to do.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like like the PC zone is a thing into its, like, almost, in a way, it's almost an animal into itself compared to some of our other reviews. So I mean, that could be a separate one, I would think.
Okay. Well, with that, it brings me to the next item, which is that I've been talking to staff about us having a retreat. And what I'm looking at is that we would have it in January. And January happily, we have a canceled meeting, which is the first meeting in January, but we also happen to have 5 weeks in January. So I'm looking at either, I think it's the 17th or the 31st for a retreat. Is that correct?
No, okay. So let's just take a look at the calendar. So that January 2nd, traditionally we've canceled the first meeting of January because for obvious reasons, getting a packet out over Christmas is kind of crazy. And then, go skiing or something, have some fun. January 9th it could be a replacement, date to replace. January 16th is the only regular public hearing. Okay, so that's 2 weeks there. And then we have January 23rd and January 30th that do not have meetings. So we have 3 options, the 9th, the 23rd, and the 30th. If it was the 9th, the packet would come to you on January 2nd. If it was the 23rd, you get the packet the day of the ARB meeting on the 16th. So there it is. Have a look at your calendars, I guess, maybe get back to us.
I think the 23rd, particularly because it would give everyone a little more time to get ready for it, and
we appreciate prep time.
Yeah, it seems like that's the best opportunity. I'd be open to the 30th as well.
Board Member Malone Pritchard?
Either the 23rd or the 30th would work for me.
Okay.
23rd will work for me too.
What about the 30th? That's a 5th Thursday.
Yeah, that'd be all right too.
Board Member Liu?
I haven't even done my calendar for next year, but I will put both dates in.
Okay, so why don't you work out what day works best for planning staff? I think
if you all want to think of wish lists for how staff can help you. I mentioned a couple things. I know we have the parcel report request. We've also the list of projects. I'll get that out to you. And what might go on that agenda as far as are we going to talk about like the annual report and El Camino and this kind of public education?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we agendize for the next meeting discussion of topics for a retreat? Okay, and a little bit on work schedule, because something's going to have to give here. We can't do it all.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Sure.
What exactly is your concept of a retreat? I mean, it varies from organization to organization. I mean, is that the same sort of format as this? We all sit in like one of the conference rooms?
It usually happens off-site, either in another public facility or a building nearby. It has to be accessible for the public. We've done them at the downtown library across the street. I think that's a great location. I like it. We've done them at Lucy Stern, and we've done it at the Gamble House.
But sort of like a conference room type concept where the public can come in, sit around.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's much more informal. We usually sit around a table and break it up into discussion topics, and they're usually they're like half a day. So we'd probably convene in the morning and we would break up around lunchtime, or we could have it the other way around where we meet for lunch and then have it in the afternoon.
And there is opportunity for oral communications, public comment as well.
Okay, that's sort of what I thought, but seeing as though I haven't been to one here, I thought I'd ask. Okay.
Any other thoughts while we're still on this topic?
I just wanted to ask the board, I had sent out an email regarding the rail corridor maps that you wanted to potentially use in the effort looking at El Camino, and I had sent 3 different images. Alex had gotten back to me with images that he would like forwarded, but if you could just let me know if those images or any other images from that are preferred, and then how you want them to be provided to you would be helpful, and along with the parcel maps that you had also requested. Parcel reports. There is an issue. You had asked for those to be at a 40 scale, but that doesn't capture the entirety of many of the parcels. So we may have to try to work out a different size.
Okay. For me, I've been using the rail corridor report itself, so that's why I haven't responded. I have it in electronic form, so.
In the maps that you sent, actually, I was able to extract all of the line work out of those PDFs and bring it into CAD, and I was able to manipulate it, so it's worked well for me.
I might make an announcement too. Our parcel reports that we've been, you come into the development center and, or ask staff to help you out with it. Very soon, we're going to be able to have people can do that in the comfort of their homes and produce their own parcel reports with a toggle online. I think in a matter of weeks. Wow. And I'll send out that announcement when it's up and running. So.
Cool.
24-hour access.
Okay, so just moving on here, we still have Board Member Pop, who's going to report to us on City Council Monday night.
Sure. So,
Vice Chair Pop.
Sorry. So, I did attend the City Council meeting Monday evening and provided a report from our board. As a representative of our board, I identified what I thought were sort of the salient topics from our discussion and provided information about the direction that we had established for the project going forward, the items that we were hoping would return to subcommittee, or we had asked to have returned to subcommittee, and the council took action on the item and approved the project that evening.
Thank you very much for representing us. We do have one item that's coming forward on December 9th, 240 Hamilton. Is that right?
Yes, 240. I should update you on all the council meetings that have ARB appealed items on them. I shouldn't say all of them, but anyways, a few. So December 2nd, the 636 Waverly appeal. It has a placeholder, basically no time to get something together for that, that puts it at the December 16th with a full staff report addressing the appeal. So December 16th would be an opportunity for the council to either act on it or set another hearing date in January. Probably January 16th if they do decide to schedule it for a hearing. So take a look at those dates. December 16th, could that be right? January 13th. Then 240 Hamilton does appear on the December 9th agenda. Staff is preparing some additional work on that with respect to some questions that had come from a council member back on September 9th, as well as more discussion about context related to the historic district and nearby older buildings. So that would be great to have a representative on December 9th for that public hearing. So that's a public hearing, not a consent placement.
I've already agreed to cover 240 Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And I've asked Board Member Malone Pritchard to take care of Waverly. So are there any other items that?
And I'd just say to that, I think that's an opportunity whenever something's appealed to help folks understand that what walks in the door and comes to the first ARB meeting gets changed through the process and ends up with something else. So I think it's an opportunity for staff and the ARB rep to highlight, we look back and think about the first image of the 636 Waverly with its extruded trusses, bracing or whatever that was. And then where it ended up. That's just an example, but I think that's an educational moment that we have to help people understand that something happens in this process that results in a better building. Is it what everyone wants? I don't know, but it certainly is better than what walks in the door.
Okay. And then just one last comment I wanted to make with regard to this. The variance for 240 is off the table, the setback variance.
That is correct. It was not appealed.
Okay, so it's only the architect ARB
context, design in context. The parking is modified now due to the ordinance having, affected it because it's coming in after the ordinance passed. So they're going to be paying something for in lieu spaces.
Okay, and the project over on Cowper that did not get appealed?
Yeah, surprisingly, I think there was a desire to do so, but there was a deadline that passed.
Okay, great. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I understand there's an agenda for December 2nd that might have some design issues involved as well. Could you maybe talk about what that is?
Yes, there's going to be a somewhat comprehensive report. Comprehensive is probably the right word. Dealing with, where are we in the comprehensive plan update, and what are we looking at as far as parking and traffic globally in the city, and what's happening, and given comments made recently about PCs and this kind of thing. What's staff up to? What are we looking at in the new year? And basically an open-ended discussion, but trying to focus it somehow. So staff's in that effort right now, and that's December 2nd. So coming up quick.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we have one item on the subcommittee, and the subcommittee is Board Member Liu and Pop. And what we will do is we will look at the beginning of the year to change out Board Member Pop and come up with another board member at that time. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.